Hello and welcome to Chattin, the weekly show where we start a discussion that you guys can continue in the comments. This week we're speaking about education in games. So on Monday we started our first ever live stream series. We played Islandsaver after discussing it on our podcast, and it got me thinking about other games that teach you real world skills and just educate in general, because education in games is quite a big thing, but we don't talk about it all that often, and sometimes we don't associate educational games with just entertaining ones, so I thought I'd compile a list of games that were both educational and entertaining. So first off is Islandsaver. This is the game that inspired the list, so we might as well tell you a little bit about it. Built in collaboration with NatWest, the main goal of this game is to just sort of teach kids and young people about banking, essentially. You'll be tasked with setting your own PIN number, and if you're playing on console, that'll include just using buttons, so, XX, circle, triangle, or something. And that was quite cool in and of itself, to be honest. That kind of caught me off guard when we were playing on the live stream. But then you've also got to deal with things like interest rates and tax, but it's all brought together in quite a fun, gameplay-orientated system, which means that you're not just being taught about banking and it's very dry. It's quite fun and entertaining with a great little simple gameplay loop that they just add wee bits to every now and again, which is always great. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun with it, and I think it has a lot of really good application when it comes to teaching young people about banking. Next up, I want to talk about a game that I'd forgotten came out, and I didn't really know much about it until I started researching, and that's Rocksmith. Now, at the time, I just wrote this off as being the same as Rock Band and Guitar Hero, but it's really not. It's totally different. And I think it's actually a really great time to get into it if you can find a copy of it. Essentially, what you do is you play your actual guitar in a Guitar Hero kind of setting. So you can learn to play guitar while playing a video game. The game comes with a cord that you plug into your guitar with your audio jack, and then you plug a USB end into your console, and essentially what you'll be doing is just learning to play guitar. So it'll come up with the chords that you have to play or the individual notes, and difficulty you'll get progress. And it was praised for the idea of just being able to get straight into playing songs instead of more traditional methods of learning guitar, which would be, learning technique or, other music-y things that I don't quite understand, but I'm sure Andrew can explain during our podcast this week, fingers crossed. Yeah, I think it's a really cool idea, and considering we're in lockdown right now and people are wanting to learn real-world skills, why don't we learn guitar with Rocksmith? Next up is a more traditional education-focused game. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Now, this is such a big franchise that it's even got its own animated Netflix show now. Even before Carmen was on our screens on Netflix, she was teaching people about culture, geography, and history, forcing players to solve puzzles in order to track down this notorious thief. It allowed people to learn in a way that would allow them to progress in a video game, which is quite cool. And I think with an entertaining cast of characters, it really solidified it as being a good game that was also education focused, and it has a big following. So it's not just, another game that'll teach you stuff like on Education City or something. It's a bit more than that, which is always good fun. Next up, I want to talk about Dreams. Now, how many times have we heard people saying, we've heard architects that say that they got their start by playing Lego as a kid, or Connects, or, building stuff like that. I reckon that in a few years' time, we'll have game developers saying that their first experience with game design was Dreams. Brought to us by the same team that made Little Big Planet, this game focuses on you creating your own stuff, meaning that you can build anything from a racing game to a side-scrolling platformer. It's an amazing wee tool that I think will capture the imagination of hundreds of potential game designers and developers that we might be seeing a bit more of in the future. Now, last up, I want to speak about Kerbal Space Program, and I know it's a bit of a silly game, so, or at least on the surface level, you send little green astronauts into space. That sounds like it's probably not going to be the most educational thing in the world, and I get where you're coming from. However, I remembered a podcast I listened to. And it's an episode of That Game Changed My Life by BBC, brought to us by the wonderful Julia Hardy and Aoife Wilson. And they spoke to a guy called Arsenio, who's now working for NASA. Arsenio learned orbital mechanics and rebuilt real-world NASA space shuttles in-game. And yeah, now he works for NASA, and he did that in his interview with a Wii remote. Now that's something that I'm going to let you listen to Julia and Aoife's podcast so you can hear exactly what happened there. But back to Kerbal, it's a lot more in-depth than you think it is on the surface level, and being able to build space shuttles that actually work and obey the laws of physics is an incredible platform, and is so much more than just a silly little game, even though, yes, there is fun to be had. And that's the whole point of this list, is games that are fun and educational. Kerbal Space Program can inspire literal rocket scientists. Now, I think that's the coolest thing in the world, that people can start working for NASA and their main inspiration or their main sort of source for their information was a video game, and that is the coolest thing in the world. So yeah, hats off to Kerbal Space Program for making rocket science, literal rocket science, entertaining and at least slightly understandable. I still can't get a rocket into orbit, but I think that says more about me than anything else. So that's our list of video games that are both entertaining and educational. What games do you love that also taught you a little something? Please let us know in the comments. After all, the whole point of this show is to entertain and to start conversations. Let's find out what other games can teach you a little something. As always, I've been your host Ryan, you've been watching Scottish Games Network TV, you've been awesome, and we shall see you next time.